We are almost halfway through the NFL season with Week 8 in the books, and Zero RB Bros celebrated as some of their favorite players like Tyrone Tracy and Ladd McConkey skyrocketed their advance rates from 3% to 5%. This is
Pat Fryer Helmo.
This is why I'm hot.
Anita Handjob.
Fix your sight.
Jamar. Alpha play chase.
Are you kidding me? Kadarius Toney?
You can't handle the heat.
It looks like we're finally at this point. You're right.
Apparently the Tyrone Tracy skyrocketing your advance rates all the way up to 5% hit a little too close to home for you, Drico. You cut me off there.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. What happened was I realized that I actually posted the week 8 one in the Discord as well. So I guess I need to I need to ping to get the week 9.
Gotcha. Well, we can vamp a bit while you send out the bat signal to let the people know that we're live. But it was a fun week 8. We definitely had some pretty fun performances. The Ladd McConkey breakout was certainly really cool to see. I mean, the last couple weeks, the Chargers have seemed like functional passing the ball, despite not wanting to. So that's at least a little encouraging for the Ladd shares.
Yeah. So I think what was posted on Twitter as well. Okay. What was posted on Twitter is okay. Now I have the right signal. Okay, that's the right one.
This is excellent.
Is the week 8 currently? Is the week 8 one we did as well? So, now I think only now people are getting the link.
Well, they'll have to join us a couple minutes behind. They missed some of the spectacular content that we've already delivered tonight.
Me panicking of like, oh shit.
I think we can go ahead and jump into the charts tonight, though. We don't need to dilly-dally.
Sorry, I wanted to post the right link on Twitter as well.
Gotcha.
So we've got sorry about the delay, folks, and maybe we can kind of like cut that off in the audio. But we've got the QB volume and efficiency and rushing chart here. So we have expected points on the horizontal axis, which is the represent. That's kind of like the volume from passing. Adjusted yards per attempt on the vertical, which is efficiency. And then the size of the bubble corresponds to rushing yardage. And I guess the one thing that jumps out to me straight away here is just the pure volume for Baker Mayfield. And I think some of that is driven by kind of an outlier game against the Eagles, where they had this 15% pass rate over expected. But they still had some pretty solid games other than that over expected as well. And even with the injuries to their two top receivers this week, they still had 50 dropbacks with no receivers. So I think that's pretty interesting that they still were very much willing to operate the offense through Baker Mayfield. I think they kind of had to because they actually did have to throw a lot against the Falcons, who had the lead. But I still think that's pretty encouraging for their kind of belief in Baker Mayfield and for that volume and the overall passing attack.
Yeah, it definitely seems like Baker Mayfield is the straw that stirs the drink in this offense, which is a little surprising given how good Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are. But it definitely looks like they're confident in Baker, and it seems like the passing volume is not a mirage. It's something that we can expect to sustain throughout the season. I believe that right now I correct me if I'm wrong, is Baker the quarterback 2 on the season?
I don't know, but that would not surprise me. Like he has put up a lot of. I can tell you exactly in just a second. I can tell you exactly how many points he scored, but I'm not sure if he's the QB2 or not. So
we've got.
He scored 24 points a game, which is pretty good. That is pretty good fantasy production.
Now he's running pretty hot on touchdowns.
We got confirmation from producer Mark here that he is quarterback too. So great call.
Yeah, he's running pretty hot on touchdowns. Mark. But I mean, at this point, just as far as like counting stats by the end of the year, it's going to be pretty hard for Baker Mayfield to not finish a top 5 fantasy quarterback. That's not to say that his points per game over the second half of the season is going to sustain that high. But if you made me bet on it, top 5 for the rest of the season in points per game, not counting what he's already done, it's probably going to be pretty hard. But I mean, I'm drinking the Baker Kool-Aid, man. I think he's proven himself to be a really solid NFL quarterback.
Yeah. And so he had a six, and it was 50 attempts, not 50 dropbacks. He had 6 adjusted yards per attempt on like a 7.8 ADOT. So like not the best efficiency, but on a 50 attempt game where you're chasing the game, that's pretty solid. That is pretty solid.
You're doing it with Sterling Shepard, and Jalen McMillan.
Right.
Not to.
So if they're to get Mike Evans back at some point, then it's pretty strongly wheels up for Mike Evans.
Yeah, it does sound like it's probably post week 11 for Mike Evans from what I've seen, but obviously that can develop here over the next couple weeks. Maybe he comes back a little earlier, but regardless.
So speaking of guys who have had high volume in the past. So I see that Josh Allen, I'm not sure, I don't want to get in specific contests, but I see that Josh Allen remains the quarterback 1 by ADP on Underdog. And I know we kind of noted that in week 7, they had a 10% pass rate over expected after following the Amari trade. And we were like, well, is that because of intent or is that because of injuries to their running backs? And so they came back down to a 0%, so neutral pass rate over expected in week 8. So to me, that kind of suggests that maybe we kind of saw a one-time blip there. It's not as negative as it was before. I know that, let me see. So they posted a couple of big negative games. So maybe they're not going to be as run heavy as they were before. But I guess it's probably it's probably somewhere between slightly negative to slightly above positive pass rate over expected. So all that to say, I think we've gotten a little bit more evidence that this kind of like 50 dropback game is 50 dropbacks per game or 40 dropbacks per game is not on the table for Josh.
Yeah, I would say that for this matchup coming up this week, they've got the Dolphins and the Bills. Prior to that one blip on the radar where they actually passed above expected, they were very run heavy. They really tried to keep the ball on the ground, not running a ton of plays. But Miami's a run funnel, and so I expect them to probably stick to what they've shown us the most rather than that one blip. For the first week they had Amari Cooper. Now, there's a lot to parse here because Miami was a run funnel, I think, in part because they couldn't score any points. And so teams were happy to just run on them. When Tua wasn't in, the Dolphins were not a threat on offense. And so you could just run the ball and get out of the game quickly with an easy win as long as you just ran on Miami. Their run defense wasn't terribly imposing, and you weren't really compelled to pass against them because they weren't scoring any points. So I would expect the Bills to be a little leaning towards run heavy as a tendency this week.
Right.
However,
and that's been pretty consistent across opponents. only one Dolphins opponent this year has had a positive pass rate over expected, and I guess it's not like even the Jaguars were -7 last week, week 8. They saw a -2%. So I know there's you don't have this huge sample size with Tua playing, but it still feels like they're a bit of a run funnel there.
Yeah, I certainly think that the most likely thing is the Dolphins are a run funnel, and the most likely thing is the Bills want to run the ball. So it definitely makes me lean towards thinking that the Bills will have lower pass volume in this game. However, you do have the wild card factor of the Dolphins with Tua can go out and they can hang 50 on you in the blink of an eye with a Tyreek Hill or Devon Chan explosive play. Apparently not a Jaylen Waddle explosive play. Those just don't exist anymore. Although it would be a really fun week for Jaylen Waddle to just explode and show us that, yes, he is a very viable third threat on that offense. So I think you're out to the Bills.
If you're playing the Bills, you have to play true to Dolphins.
Yeah, if you're playing the Bills, if you're playing Josh Allen specifically, because his price is pretty high, but if you're playing Josh Allen specifically, I really, really want to have one of the Dolphins' explosive playmakers on my team to try and push the pace.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. And I guess just given what you've laid out there, I do think that Josh Allen picked 12.4. Now I think this is for mainly on 6-team drafts, and then Tua Tagovailoa at 35.6. And then if you need Tua to go off to unlock the Bills, that would push me to like actually preferring Tua this week over Josh Allen.
Yeah, Tua is free. You can get him in the last round. I actually built something that gives me the ADP in the dog bowl draft specifically. And so I've got the Josh Allen ADP here. He's averaging pick 14.3 in the dog bowls. He's gone as late as pick 22 and as early as pick 8. And by the way, the person who got him at pick 22 is yours truly. So I'm willing to take him if he goes all the way to pick 22. That's certainly fine. And then just very happy to play it as I've played this game as an onslaught quite often here because I think there's a chance that this ends up being one of those really fun games where you get 80 points or something silly like that.
So if I was to, and I think Tua is like a smart contrarian play, and because it's not as popular as it should be based on what you would have thought going into this season, and based on results last year, it does look like their O-line hasn't been good. Like I see Tua. Not sure how many dropbacks he's had, but Tua just 2.28 time to throw, a 6.4 ADOT, and I guess like not great efficiency. So I guess I want to put some credence into the negative results this year that the magic hasn't been there, but with the way that you can play it as contrarian as you can, it makes sense to do.
Yeah, and it's pretty small sample that we have for Tua so far, and I also think a big part of the ADOT is coming from the Devon Chan schemed touches here, where they're doing these very short behind the line of scrimmage targets for him. So I think that's probably depressing some of the ADOT where
somewhat, but it's still 6.4.
Right.
Like that's really low. That's one of the lowest of any quarterbacks this year.
Well, the Dolphins are a pretty run heavy team. They're not getting a ton of pass attempts, and Achane is getting an enormous amount of targets. If you look at how many targets he's actually in the games that Tua has played, I think it's 7 targets, 8 targets, and 8 targets or something like that. So like a large percentage of the offense or the pass attempts are going for 0 to negative ADOT. So if you remove that, it definitely boosts the ADOT up a little bit. And also, I don't really think that those are necessarily a bad thing for Tua's production or efficiency either, because I think any of those targets can end up being house calls. So I'm really interested in. I think the whole Dolphins offense is a buy low. I'm pretty sure they're still priced down on DraftKings as well. I believe that Tyreek is still like in the low 7,000s this week, and he's just not. He's not a
right. I know that he's at pick 14 on Underdog, and if you had told somebody that Tyreek Hill would be pick 14 and a weekly, like they wouldn't have believed you.
Well, Tyreek's high. I think his ADP is something like 8, but his average ADP in the dog bowls is 6.5. His ADP is going to be screaming up, and by the time
yeah, you're right. I misquoted that's his projection in the app. It's his ADP is 8. You're right.
Yeah. Now, Chan had an ADP early in the week of say 20 something. He's never gone that late in a dog bowl. He's got an average of just under pick 14, and the latest he's ever gone is pick 19. But yeah, I think you want to be attacking this Dolphins offense before they give you the big explosion game like we know they're capable of. And I like this spot for it because the Bills certainly can push them. And I think the Bills can fight back if the Dolphins do happen to get out to an early lead. So,
and then I guess if I'm arguing against myself, their PFF O-line grade is 16th overall, and the pass block win rate per ESPN is 10th overall. So maybe the O-line has actually played better than some of those numbers would suggest, and they are actually fully capable of still pushing the ball down the field, and it's definitely you're not having to pay Dolphins prices right now.
No, and I mean even last year, Tua had a really low time to throw, even when pushing the ball down the field. That's what happens when you have like the fastest player in the NFL running routes. You can actually still target him down the field.
It was low, but 2.3 is exceptionally low. Yeah. I'm gonna look that up. Look up what his was last year. But I guess the other one that I kind of like that caught my eye was Matthew Stafford here, where a lot of his efficiency has been kind of per this year over the full year, but that's been missing Puka, that's been missing Cooper Kupp. But then they also when you look at last week 8, they tore up the kind of like heralded Minnesota Vikings defense. And so if they're able to do that because Puka's back, because Cooper Kupp is back, then the Seattle defense is a pretty enticing matchup too, I would think.
Yeah, I really like this game in general. I think pretty much all of the pieces in this game are underpriced right now on Underdog. Puka has an ADP like near the end of the first round. I would say Puka's probably should be going in like the top 6, top 7. And then you get Kenneth Walker. He's like, some ridiculous ADP. He's been screaming up though too. But he was going middle of the second round in dog bowls. He's coming up a lot. And Stafford is entirely free. Now, it's not a state secret. I've actually seen a decent number of people drafting Stafford this week.
Right. It's so hard for me to believe that that's like a thing that nobody else will see.
Yeah, now I'm pretty sure that when projections come out still, he's probably going to barely be on the threshold of like a top 12 QB this week, just because he's a pocket passer. The game does have a pretty good total, but I think people might be a little gung-ho for him now. It's not translating into like an untenable ADP or anything like that. He's available in the last round every time. It's just you're not going to sneak by like an undrafted or very low owned Matt Stafford like you would have been able to in previous weeks. But I've seen lots of
right. That's still kind of a smash price where it like this is a pretty strong setup for Matt Stafford for like a pretty good pocket passer, and definitely relative to the prices of other guys, it seems pretty enticing.
Yeah, let me take a look at where he's been going here.
And while you're looking that up, you're right. So last year, Tua's average time to throw was 2.25. So it's his time to throw here is actually pretty good point. It's pretty characteristic of what was last year. It's within 0.03 seconds of last year, and so yeah, you're right. This that's not a that's definitely not a reason to shy away at all.
So yeah, Matt Stafford goes pretty late. He's got an average price of going in the last round. Couple guys that go like right before him on average. Caleb Williams, who I probably prefer Stafford to Williams this week. You've got let's see here. Bo Nix has gone before him on average. Dak is in a. That's actually an interesting one. What do you think about Dak versus Stafford straight up?
I mean, I think you have to. I think Stafford is a much better position. Like I don't think I put too much between. Like if somebody put a gun to my head and said who's the better quarterback, it would be hard for me to decide. And then I think it's a much better setup for Stafford than Dak, where they actually have multiple talented players on the offense.
Yeah, I mean you're definitely right in that regard. I do think the game total is I want to say it's like 3 points higher for Dallas. Let me pull it up here. But I do know both of these are two of the better game totals on the week. But let's see, we've got for Dallas, the game total is up at 53. So that is actually the highest total on the week. And then for the Rams and Seahawks, it's at 48.5. That one's basically a pick 'em, just one point there. Cowboys and Falcons, also pretty close spread, only a 2-point spread there. So both these games should be competitive according to the lines, and they should have lots of points. But I think in general there, I'm just gonna default to the higher line when the higher implied team total when I've got two spots where I think they're pretty even, and also Dallas has like next to no ability to score rushing touchdowns. And the Rams do really like scoring rushing touchdowns. Like that is all Kyren Williams knows how to do. So I think I probably lean Dak there, but that's not to say that Stafford's a bad pick by any means. And I think they're both viable, certainly.
That is so wild to me that Dallas has a higher implied team total than the Rams. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I guess Vegas knows better.
Yeah, four and a half more points.
I don't understand that.
Sorry, and that's the game. The game total is 4.5 more.
Right, the game total. So they probably have like 2 extra implied points. So yeah, I think that's kind of like a reason to it's almost like a tiebreaker rather than anything else.
Right.
But yeah, I just have a hard time believing that. Given like just the complete lack of talent on that offense, other than like those 2 players, Stack and CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, I mean they've certainly looked atrocious. I don't really want to be hitching my wagon to that offense, but I do think that they're capable of scoring. I don't want to say that a ton of the dysfunction was due to not having any semblance of a running game, with Rico Dowdle being ruled out, but we'll certainly touch on that later. Another quarterback spot that I think is interesting to talk about here, we've got Jameis Winston. Now, part of the Jameis Winston stuff for why he looks like such an outlier on the chart for the expected fantasy points from passing is I think we have in the game where he took over part of the way through. So we don't have the full game there, so it's kind of making him look like he's throwing a lot less than he actually was. But he was very efficient. Put up a pretty big game, they get a tough defense here this week against the Chargers.
So last week, no, I'm on the wrong page. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No,
I'm not knowing the answer.
but they do get a really tough defense this week in the Chargers. I think it's going to be a really hard spot.
They had 20.4 expected points from passing against the Ravens.
Okay,
and then he had 25 for actual points from passing, and that's against a pretty clear run pass funnel.
Yeah,
but the defense is much tougher this week. You were saying.
Yeah, I do think it's going to be a really fragile spot to project, though, because we've got a decent history with Jameis, but not a ton with Jameis as a Brown operating in the context of this offense. So it definitely feels like a fragile spot for the projection for me. I think really like the actual interesting conversation surrounding Jameis and the Browns offense is more about like which piece to play it through. And I'll tell you right now, it's all going to be coming through like Njoku and Tillman is what I would anticipate most people wanting to do. Let me pull up the Jameis Winston combinations here. So the most common Jameis Winston combinations, number 1 is Cedric Tillman, number 2 is David Njoku. And then after that, that's pretty much, those are the only combos that are happening at like a much higher frequency than just random chance. So
I guess I don't know how right this is, but as I look at some of the PFF grades for the Chargers defense, they're like pretty mid-table in pass rush and coverage, and then not the best in run defense and tackling. I think they're like kind of like bottom mid-table. Apparently elite special teams, but PFF certainly doesn't think that they're like some offense or some defense that you need to just stay away from.
Yeah, so the Chargers are 5th in EPA allowed per dropback, 10th in dropback success percentage, 13th in explosive pass percentage. They're pretty bad at defending the splash zone. They're 29th in splash zone EPA per dropback. And they also give it up to first reads a lot, 22nd in first read EPA. But yeah, you're not wrong. Their pass rush win rate grade is low, and their time to pressure is worst in the league. So their
schedule here is pretty cupcake, where they played the Raiders, they played the Panthers, they played the Steelers, they played the Chiefs, they played the Broncos, and they played the Cardinals and the Saints. So like, but if I like, there's some like not the worst teams in there, but if I put all that together, like that's 4 or 5 like pretty like teams that were playing pretty awful offense, like the Raiders, Panthers, Broncos, and Saints. Like that's you'd want to have some pretty good advanced metric against those defenses.
Yeah, that's a good shout, and I think it's an interesting angle. So then, really, the only fly in the ointment to me that would have me at all stopping from just really aggressively attacking this game, where there's only so much you can do as far as projecting Jameis Winston. Like you can't go out and be like, yep, Jameis is going to chuck it for 300 every week and 3 touchdowns. Like that's what he's going to do. I think I would assume that most of the like publicly available projection systems, the good projections that you're going to be paying for, like at ETR and Stochastic, are going to have him for like a pretty high pass rate, just because that's what the Browns have shown us they want to do. They're happy to be an above PROE team, and now that they have Jameis Winston, they probably feel a little free to even attack that more. So the only fly in the ointment is that the Chargers are slow and they want to run the ball a bunch, right? So the Chargers can really sour the game by just like slowing everything down. But yeah, and
then I guess the only question is like, will they actually be able to run on the Browns? Like that because that could be like a setup where they try to establish the run, they fail, and then the Browns actually end up with a lot of possessions because the Chargers can't get it going. Like, this is a very strong Browns defense.
The Chargers rushing offense has been pretty bad too. They're 21st in EPA per rush, 21st in rush success rate, 31st in run grade. Like, they're decent at run block win rate, but only 13th there. And Dobbins has not looked fantastic either.
He's serviceable. He's fine. Like, I probably might even play him because of his how much he dominates the snap rate there. But this is a very good, strong Browns defense, and that would almost be a point to pushing me into still playing the Browns.
Yeah,
the more you say that, I was like, okay, so this is a team that wants to pass the ball a lot with a quarterback who is a very aggressive passer. Is he always good? No, but he's aggressive, so he's going to put up. He's probably going to put up numbers. I don't know if you want to play a true Jahmyr stack. I think you certainly can, but that's a pretty interesting offense to get pieces of.
Yeah, and let me just to discuss the Chargers side of the ball and how it can relate to the game script here. They've actually been passing more lately. So I'm going to read you the pass attempts for the first 5 weeks of the season, first 4 weeks because Chargers had a bye. First 4 games the Chargers played. 26 attempts, 20 attempts, 18 attempts, 27 attempts. So those are the first 4 weeks. No attempts, no games over 30 attempts. Really, really low passing volume, just atrocious. Then, starting with their game against Denver, so strong pass defense, 34 attempts there, 39 attempts against the Cardinals 2 weeks ago, 32 attempts against the Saints in a pretty easy win. They weren't forced to pass here at all. And Justin Herbert's had 237 yards, 349 yards, and 279 yards in the last 3 games. So the trend is definitely upward for the Justin Herbert passing game. And
that's kind of held up by the pass rate over expected, where in week 6, 2%, week 7, 4%, week 8, 5%. So that's 3 weeks in a row of above neutral pass rate over expected. And finishing with 5% is pretty. It's not humongous, but it's pretty solid.
Yeah, we are not a betting show, and I do not bet any sides or totals, so I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But looking at this line, Chargers Browns is at 42, one of the lowest lines on the week. I think the only line that's lower is Patriots Titans at 38. Yeah, so Chargers Browns, second lowest line on the week. It's the same line as Texans and Jets. This feels kind of like a sneaky over spot to me. I think the more we talk about this game, the more interested I am in attacking it on both sides. And the other thing that's really interesting is Ladd McConkey is still free in dog bowl drafts, and he was very clearly the Chargers wide receiver 1 prior to this week, and then he has this huge breakout and displays some of the things that made us so excited about the profile, that he can win downfield. He's a very good athlete. He's good with the ball in his hand. So he's free. And then circling all the way back to the thing I was first saying about the Browns, people are going hard on Cedric Tillman and David Njoku. Elijah Moore was the target leader. And I don't think it's crazy to say that the touchdowns that went to Cedric Tillman could very easily have gone to Elijah Moore instead. And I haven't seen the first read data yet, but I would bet you dollars to donuts that Elijah Moore was probably getting a grip of the first read stuff, just the way that his profile has been in the past. I'm making an assumption here. So when Pat comes out with the walkthrough later this week and that's not the case, I'm happy to be wrong. But my assumption prior to looking at the first read data is I would bet you that Elijah Moore is the one getting that first read stuff. And that has been where the Browns are kind of weak. So as teams really
Chargers, you mean?
Excuse me.
But we don't have the first read data, and we do have the targets. And so week 8, he had a 33% targets per out run, 11 targets, 85 yards, 2.6 yards per out run. So that he's the one. He was their main target owner in that game. And then because Cedric Tillman had the like very high profile touchdown at the end, that's kind of stolen the spotlight. But Elijah Moore pretty attractive there.
Yeah, and Browns. And this is as of last week. Browns defense first read EPA per dropback, 24th in the league, and I think that speaks to just teams trying to get the ball out quick against their pass rush. So kind of like Elijah Moore this week, he's going to be free. So yeah, I really like that spot here.
Elijah Moore, who plays for the Browns. So you were saying that the Chargers are weak against the first read stuff?
No. The Browns are 24th in the league.
Okay.
In first read EPA per dropback on defense.
Okay. So that would be suggestive for Ladd McConkey?
Yes.
Okay. But I think earlier you had that same point about the Chargers.
I believe it's true for both. Let me go pull the Chargers back up. I think the Chargers are a little bit worse there. Let's find out. Chargers pass defense, first read EPA, 22nd. So yeah, they both are not great. And yeah, Chargers very weak at defending the splash zone.
So yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. Like, I'm worried because the Browns defense is that good. That gives me the one concern. But it's such a contrarian play that I think you can kind of like look through that.
Yeah, I'm pretty into this game. I'm sneakily into this game. Now these numbers are, I don't know if we can throw them out entirely, but it's going to be hard to rely on these since most of these came with Deshaun Watson. But Elijah Moore, first percentile in splash zone target rate. Tillman and Judy, both about the same, 48th and 49th percentile, respectively. So who knows?
Right. I mean, here, like, I guess we don't have the just isolated the Jahmyr stats, but to me it doesn't have to be any more complicated than Elijah Moore, main target earner on this team in his first game and the game without what's the guy who they traded, Amari Cooper. I don't think it actually has to be any more complicated than, like, he's the main guy getting targets. He's completely under the radar because of the Cedric Tillman touchdown. He should be a target.
Yeah, definitely agree. Are there
and that's the same for I think that I know we're on the quarterback part, but I think he's a pretty compelling waiver target as well. Like, if he shouldn't be under the radar, but like if he is, like, he's a pretty. It doesn't get much better of a waiver target than Elijah Moore.
Yeah, absolutely. Were there any other quarterbacks you wanted to touch on, or should we?
No. I'm ready to move on.
Okay.
Onto the running backs, and so I guess my notes here were the first one being the kind of obligatory nod to Kyren, where he is the running back dominator. He is the one they want to get in the end zone. Have been doing that every game. And then with that offense now playing well with the return of their 2-star receivers, like, I think Kyren is basically RB1 this week. It doesn't seem like he's priced like that. Maybe that changes closer towards the game. But to me, he's pretty clear RB1.
You think he's RB1 this week?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of the stronger spots on the week. The other guys who like go ahead of him be Alvin Kamara, who also has a very strong role and is going against the Panthers.
So to me, Kamara is kind of like a safe projectable volume play, where
yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just agreeing with you.
Where he's in the games where they're doing poorly, he's just getting force-fed targets. I guess if they are able to do well against this Panthers defense, it will be true Kamara. But given like the systemic issues with the offense, I know he had this hot start to the year, Kamara did, but that hasn't really continued. And maybe I have egg on my face this time next week, but to me that doesn't scream GPP play. Like it doesn't he's priced as RB1, like, and I'm not saying that he's like a bad play. It just I think Kyren is a better play. Like, tell me what Kamara has that Kyren doesn't, in terms of volume, and then tell me why he's going to be more efficient than like a young, better player.
He will not be more. Kamara will not be more efficient than anyone. Like full stop. But the thing that Kamara will do is he'll get all these stupid, really annoying targets. Where he's just they've got him lined up out wide.
How does that win you a GPP though?
I mean, dude, death by 1,000 PPR scams can certainly get there. I mean, the guy had 15 points this last week, and he did not look particularly good.
I mean, 15 points is 15 points. Like you take that,
but without
your
without
basketball
getting in
teams
the
are
end
happy
zone.
with.
It's without getting in the end zone, and now they're playing against the Panthers, who just seem entirely hopeless on defense. So I don't know. I certainly don't want to be the one stumping for Kamara. I definitely think that there's a strong case for Kyren to go over him. The one that I think is
right, and that's all I'm trying to say. All I'm trying to say is that Kyren, to me, it's pretty clearly Kyren over Kamara.
The one that now it's not like this guy's going overlooked or anything. His ADP's about 6, so he's still going in the first round. But I think Derrick Henry is probably getting a little too much hate for this matchup. So they're playing against the Broncos, and I think people are reading into it too much through the lens of like, oh, the Broncos are a really strong defense, therefore bad for Derrick Henry. And I think Derrick Henry doesn't really give a shit one way or another how good or bad your run defense is. I think what Derrick Henry and his production cares about is more what is the game script for the Ravens. And the Ravens are 10-point favorites in this game. And so I mean, when the Ravens get it, the Ravens are such a bipolar team where when they are in a situation where they think they need to be passing, they are like all in on the passing. Like, Derrick Henry, get off the field. It's Justice Hill time. And we saw that in the first half of their game 2 weeks ago, where Henry only got, I think it was like only 4 touches in the entire first half because Justice Hill was on the field the whole time. But when the Ravens get ahead, they flip the switch and all of a sudden it's Derrick Henry time. I just see this as a game where the Ravens could be ahead pretty early and it could get ugly here. I mean,
but I guess my pushback would be, don't you think like that being 6th overall is like an appropriate discount with his game script risk? Like, none of these other guys have that kind of like game script risk in their profile. They all have upside, like that's why they're in the first round. But I think he should be cheaper just because of that additional risk that you don't have with those other guys.
Yeah, that's reasonable. I might just be discounting the game script risk too much because,
right. The base case is there isn't any.
Yeah, getting a 10-point spread implies that it's going to be pretty damn tough for the Broncos to be in a strong position this game and dictate the pass to the Ravens. So that's
right. The most likely scenario is that they're ahead, is that they establish the run and like they get Derrick Henry going. But I guess to me it's almost like, well, those other like that's something that you need to have happen that you don't need for those other players. So even if it's like a 70%, 75, 80% chance, that's still a 20% chance that your guy, your 6th overall pick, just gets game scripted out of the game.
Yeah, one of the guys I thought was really interesting on this chart is Tony Pollard with no Tajay Spears is up here just with an absolute workhorse role.
In the last 2 weeks, he's 85% snap rate.
Couple warts on the frog here, though. Number one, Mason Rudolph's his quarterback, so that's not great. Number two, they're playing against the Patriots, who the Patriots have been bad against the run. This last week, they actually weren't quite as bad, frustratingly for anyone with Breece Hall in fantasy. But also the game total is just so low, so it's hard for me to see like the super huge Pollard's ceiling just seems a little bit more capped to me than someone like a Kyren Williams just has such a better ceiling than Tony Pollard.
Right.
Just the offense is so much better, substantially better game environment, all that stuff.
But Pollard was somebody who still gets to me too, where nowhere else are you getting this kind of and in very few other places are you getting that kind of snap share where they're going to dominate the backfield, and he is going very, very cheap, very, very cheap, and I could definitely see there's been much stranger things than the Titans having a good game against a pretty weak Patriots defense.
Yeah, I like him a lot this week. He's definitely a pretty good price-adjusted guy, too. He goes relatively cheap for his role.
Right.
He's like a fantastic running back to take in the dog bowls when you went early wide receiver or you took one of the early quarterbacks or something. And so you're just you're really behind the 8 ball at running back. And Tony Pollard just sitting there with what feels like a floor of 15 touches, so.
Right. So he had 16 expected points last week, which is pretty good. The problem is he massively underperforms that because the offense has been kind of dog shit. But maybe they can be pretty good against them. I mean, the Titans did pretty good against the Dolphins defense, and I don't think the Dolphins defense is any is considerably worse than the Patriots defense. So to me, it's such a clearly possible outcome that he smashes against his Patriots defense.
Yeah, definitely a good call on Pollard. I like him there. You had a good note about Bijan. Now I believe that in this last week, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he got a 60-yard touchdown called back? Am I misremembering this?
I don't remember that. I think you're probably right. Just because I don't remember it, I might have been distracted by something else when it happened.
Yeah, it's.
But I think it the underlying point it's true. It's truthful. Even I don't know if it's true, but he is a very explosive playmaker, and he clearly it's helpful that he dominates the route stuff. He dominates the passing game work. It's unfortunate that he has to split the carries, and my note here was that even when Allgeier missed time, they brought in Jace McClellan to split with Bijan instead. So clearly they're interested in keeping him fresh because he's one of their stars. They want to make sure that they're not overloading him with these low impact carries. I wish they'd overload him with some more of the goal line looks, but he's still to me he's still interesting because when you look at his expected points, 15 expected points for the year, that's still pretty good. That's still a pretty good projection, and he's also been delivering efficiency, and so you can get this guy, and I think he's had games like this where his projection or his expected points is 15, and then he goes 10 over or 15 over, so you get your 30 overall points. So I think he's a I don't think that's news to anybody, but pretty good play. And that's how to think about him, I think.
Well, and he's also in that Cowboys game with highest total on the week against a terrible run defense. I mean, I don't believe that Parsons is going to be back. I haven't been checking in on his injury status, but I believe the Cowboys are still going to be without their two best defenders for DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons. So this could be. I know a couple weeks ago people were talking about the Bijan against the Panthers spot as like it sets up for, this is the get right spot for Bijan. He has to go off here or it's over. I think we might be getting another one of those really excellent spots for Bijan this week. So he's definitely someone I'm into playing here.
Yeah, makes sense for sure. My next note was about Jahmyr Gibbs, where he's just so clearly splitting the carries, and you're only getting like 12 expected points. And so, to me, at his cost, at where he went in best ball season, it's been great to see him make the big explosive plays. But just like in kind of single week stuff, kind of need to note that you need the big runs, you need the big home run plays from him. Like that's how he gets there.
Yeah, it's tricky because when we get players like this, we a lot of times we just want to lean into it and say this guy's shown that he can deliver these fantasy breaking plays. It just takes one. And I don't know why I have some internal bias that's like stopping me from being so gung-ho about Jahmyr Gibbs like I would be about Devon Achane or like I know with
Achane is always cheaper. So
yeah,
it's like why do I play the Gibbs price when I can just get the same profile for cheaper?
And Achane's role is so much better where he's getting, 6 high value touches minimum a game. He's getting all these targets, right? And Gibbs just isn't getting as much stuff in the passing game as we would like. So, I think Gibbs is really good. It's just hard because I feel like we're being forced to pay up for that extreme efficiency, which like we should have to pay for it. But I'm starting to feel like it's probably priced to the point. At least in these weekly draft games where he's priced efficiently, his average.
Right. It's an efficient price. I think that's a good way to put it.
So let me read you a couple options this week, and you tell me who you want here. Devon Achane or Jahmyr Gibbs?
We touched on it's Achane.
Kenneth Walker or Jahmyr Gibbs?
I think you want Kenny. I think you want Kenneth Walker.
James Cook against the Dolphins or Jahmyr Gibbs?
I think that's close. I think you've got kind of similar issues for Cook where they want to get other guys involved, and you're paying for the possibility of really good efficiency.
Yeah, I think those two are pretty close. I think that's kind of a pretty similar archetype. Gibbs. So
I guess if I'm arguing against myself, I kind of said that good in my head. If I'm arguing against myself. He did get 17 rush attempts last week. So to me, actually, like reviewing that 17 rush attempts, 72 plays. So not on the field for half the plays. So actually, I'm gonna go back to what I originally said, where if he's only on the field for half the plays, very similar to Gibbs, you're paying for the possibility of efficiency. Very similar role. Just because he had a high play count last week, and that's because the Bills had a high play count, and even though he's only getting half of that half looks pretty big.
Yeah, as I think about it, I think I'm Gibbs over Cook, but it's close. I'm tie breaking. The Lions have a better offensive line, and the touchdown equity for Gibbs is probably slightly better than Cook, given the Josh.
It's much better. It's much better, right? Where Josh Allen is going to steal touchdowns.
You have David Montgomery stealing some touchdown equity from Gibbs, so I think it's close. But I do think it's Gibbs over Cook. But I think they're closer than people would think.
Right. Agreed. And my moving on my next note. So we talked about Kenneth Walker. It does look like they've gotten Chubbs back involved. So I think Kenneth Walker is still the main guy. He's dominating the rushes between the 20s, and then splitting the targets, splitting the goal line work. But
so I want to interject here because I watched this game, and Sharps was not really involved until it started getting out of hand. Like Kenneth Walker was in on pretty much all the goal line stuff early. So this game had a couple really frustrating sequences if you were invested in Kenneth Walker for fantasy this week, which I was heavily. So the Seahawks get the ball. It's 1st and goal. They snap the ball. It goes a million yards over Geno's head. Kenneth Walker sprints to the ball, manages to scoop it up and run for a little bit of positive yardage, but it's still a 19-yard loss on the play. So he gets credited for negative 19 rushing yards on that play. So that's not great. Then they finally get back up to the goal line, and it's looking like it's going to be another Kenneth Walker rushing attempt, false start on the offense. And so that's a big bummer. And then a third one, they're sitting there for this Kenneth Walker rush attempt again. The ball is snapped. It's going to be a handoff, and the center steps on Geno's foot. Geno falls down. The play is broken. No handoff. So Kenneth Walker had 3 goal line attempts that should have been, that never were. And Charbonnet really wasn't anywhere to be seen during these early portions of the game. But I mean, this game got out of hand.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. When I look at these other weeks, Kenneth Walker clearly ahead in expected. Okay, so I guess amending that statement too. He's dominating the carries in general, and then Charbonnet is a little bit involved in the passing game, which I think does give him some level of standalone value.
I'm a big Charbs fan, but this game, the value that came to Charbonnet really was just a factor of like the game. To me, it felt like they were saving Kenneth Walker. The game was so bad for the Seahawks. Geno, I don't know if you got to watch all this game. Geno Smith was crying on the sideline during this game, like actually crying. He was so frustrated. Their offense could not get anything going. And so the Seahawks didn't totally wave the white flag, but they kind of waved the white flag pretty early in this one. And Sharp started getting like full series rather than just like, spelling Kenneth Walker. And then, in fact, the touchdown that Charbonnet got, I don't think Walker saw the field at all in that drive. I want to say that it was like a 3-score game,
right,
or something.
I do. If I look at a couple of games that they've both been healthy and active for, Charbonnet has been kind of consistently involved in the passing game. He's been consistently involved with the getting routes. Like let me look at the average for. So Charbonnet over the last 4-week average, he's seen 22% routes versus 34% for Walker. So that's still like I mean 22% up and then a 40% snap rate is like that's like okay.
Yeah,
I don't think you're happy to start him. I don't think that's anywhere near playable in GPP. But I think if you have some 0 or B squads where you're crying for like a running back start, I think Sharps is fine.
Right. You could certainly do worse, but like let's think through.
But and I guess the overall point is this is Kenneth Walker's backfield. I'm not trying to take away from that point. I think that's the overall point. But I kind of in myself had thought of Charbonnet as like not even worthy of consideration. And I think for playing it in redraft, and I think he is.
Yeah, the list of guys that you'd have to get through to need to start Charbonnet is like, say Rico Dowdle is active this week for the Cowboys. You're still starting Rico Dowdle over Charbonnet. Like Chase Brown. What about Zach Moss? You doing Zach Moss or Zach Charbonnet?
Yeah, Zach Moss. But I know that there's some squads there where they don't have those guys, and it's Sean Tucker or Charbonnet.
Right, yeah,
or something like that. Where there's some squads crying for running backs, and those are the squads that I'm talking. I'm not talking about the ones where you've gotten solid 0 RB hits, and you're playing those guys. Like I don't think he's in consideration there. I think he's I guess a good desperation start.
Yeah, like you're starting on the teams where you're waiting for Kamani Vidal to do something. You're starting Charbonnet.
Right. That's a good way to put it. The other one I had was Rhamondre clearly back in the workhorse role. Particularly, and kind of particularly notable with the Anthony Gibson fumble. Rhamondre famously benched, but not really benched, for his fumbling issues in place of Antonio Gibson. That didn't seem to last long.
Yeah, I think the Rhamondre role feels pretty strong going forward. I mean, when you have Drake May in there too, I think it's definitely helpful for Rhamondre, just because the defense then has to account for Drake May's rushing ability. He's been a pretty effective rusher. He was, I believe, he was over 50 yards in this game before he went out with a concussion. So, yeah, Rhamondre definitely a very solid plug and play, low end RB2 type of guy, high end RB3. Really, really the limitation just coming from how bad the offense is. The offense is made substantially more exciting with Drake May. We'll have to see if he misses a week due to the concussion. I'd say it's pretty likely he misses a week. That's just kind of the way things seem to go in the NFL now. It's very rare that you have a guy who's able to clear the protocol and not miss a game. So,
right. Yeah. But I mean, he's still a feature player for them. So
yeah,
still pretty playable, especially in a kind of a very cheap workhorse role.
Yeah, the other guy that you have a note on here that is in an absolute workhorse role is J.K. Dobbins. So, I mean, he had some pretty incredible efficiency to start the season with some huge breakaway runs, really propelling a lot of that efficiency. Those have since dried up. I'm wondering if it was just like fluky that we got those at the start of the season, or if it was, him having fresh legs there. But if you look at where Dobbins is on this efficiency chart, he's sitting in a pretty good spot. He's right above 15 expected fantasy points per game. He's getting a lot of work, but it's been a lot less efficient lately. I'm concerned that that's a trend and has something to do with Dobbins, the player, and not just, random noise from week to week. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so obviously he started off very efficiently, and then now over the last 4 weeks, well, looks like it's the Chargers had a bye, right?
Chargers had a bye in week 5, yes.
I guess this is the last 3 weeks, so he's been over the last 3 weeks he's been negative a half, so minus 0.5 FPO over expected per game, and so like to me that's kind of neutral. I think like I'll put some stock into that 3-week average, and the trend, as you kind of noted, the trend clearly down, and so there is some question about where that bottoms out. Where does it bottom out? I don't know.
Certainly not excited to play him against the Browns this week.
No.
But again, like if you're in redraft, you're just starting him because you're getting all the volume, and so it's like whatever. You're gonna happily ho hum your way to 8 to 12 fantasy points there. You're just hoping he falls in the end zone.
Right. He's not a priority. I think he's probably like in dog bowl stuff. He's probably like a desperation play. He's not the worst. Oh, I missed all the guys I normally target, and when I get into this situation, like I'll take a shot on J.K. Dobbins because you do have that cheap volume.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. I'm looking to find his ADP here. So yeah, he goes right at the end of the 4th round. So he's 4-5 turn, but he does sometimes go like in the very last couple picks of the draft, he might go undrafted some. So he's
and so he started off 13 over expected points over expected, 10.7. Then it was minus 0.4, minus 5.2, 0, negative 1.5, 0. And yeah, that feels like you're getting somebody who's pretty close to neutral. The Browns defense definitely scares you off. Let's see how they're able to effectively establish an older back like that against a tough defense.
Let me ask you about a couple running backs compared to Dobbins this week, just straight up. So Dobbins versus James Conner, where Conner gets the Bears here.
And that feels like you'd probably do James Conner, where he has to be a key player for them, for them to kind of get going. They need James Conner to get going.
Dobbins versus Chuba Hubbard, where Chuba gets the really weak Saints run defense.
And it's probably that feels really close. I'd probably do Chuba. Probably Chuba.
Yeah, I think I'm Chuba as well here. Okay, one other note that we have to talk about that you had here was on Tyrone Tracy and the split that he had with Devin Singletary. I mean, it was about a 60-40 split, like you mentioned, but my goodness, if Tracy did not look like the far superior player, he was absolutely electric.
Oh, he shot out of a cannon. And then Singletary looked a lot more pedestrian.
Yeah, the one it's not even a knock on Tracy, but the one thing I noticed just from watching him is he was playing a lot bigger than he was running through guys, he's breaking tackles, but there were a couple times, like there was a shot where they showed him going to the sideline and taking a breather after a series of plays where he was just putting the team on his back and just doing the most for them. And he is absolutely gassed on the sideline. Like he is just dying on the sideline, which, I mean, the guy was having a career performance. But I wonder if they probably need to keep this closer to like 50-50, or at the very least, like even if they keep it 60-40, like the amount of volume that they put on Tracy's plate, I don't know if it can be sustained at the level that he got here. Sure, would be fun because he's an awesome player. And now the other really interesting thing, he does leave the game with a concussion, so you get Singletary, and Eric Gray will be involved, but I would assume that Singletary is back on his bullshit this week with just totally.
Oh, he has to dominate the touches this week,
and they get the Commanders' poor run defense. So what do you? Let's Singletary or J.K. Dobbins.
I have to pick Singletary. So yeah, you like when you see all those other cheap volume plays, J.K. Dobbins doesn't look actually that appealing. Like I prefer a lot of those guys to Dobbins. Yeah.
I've been pretty interested in Singletary. He goes undrafted in the Dog Bowls. I'm the only person who has drafted him so far in any of the rooms that I am in. So
wow.
So there's your bit of alpha. Go fuck up my unowned Devin Singletary play, you bastards. Okay, the other backfield split where we've got a fun back and a less fun back. Not to say anything bad about Devin Singletary. I really like Devin Singletary, and I think he's a better player than this other boring back that we're going to talk about. But the Rachaad White, Bucky Irving stuff. Now, do we have – I'm looking for Bucky. I don't think he's on this efficiency. Oh, no, he is. There he is. He's right next to Rhamondre Stevenson, Chuba Hubbard. So he's right in the middle here in that 10 to 15 expected fantasy point band. So the encouraging stuff for Bucky is he's getting more involved in the passing game, which seems that's kind of like a logical conclusion that we could make given the injuries to the receivers. Glad to see him starting to wrestle some of that away from Rachaad White, But Rachaad White does not look like he's going away. It does look like Sean Tucker is going to be the one that's going to fade back into fantasy irrelevance here.
The way I'm looking at it is that White and Bucky Irving are co-starters.
Yeah.
I bet for Bucky Irving to lead the team in carries the rest of the way. It definitely looks like he's making it. It's encouraging that he's making it a lot closer on routes, and then I also see that Irving he's starting to pick up some pass blocking assignments, and so that to me that erodes some of White's kind of like pass protector moat. So I think that's some pretty encouraging stuff that Bucky Irving's role is here to stay, but I agree with you where I think White's going to hang on to what he has right now.
Yeah. Let's go to the next running back efficiency chart here. Man, I mean, Joe Mixon probably just by process of elimination has to keep this role going, right? Steph Diggs, dead, out for the season now.
Joe Mixon looks good.
Yeah.
I hate saying it, but he does.
Yeah, he's a really strong play going forward. They're not on the main slate. Obviously, they are on the Showdown Thursday night slate this week. So, and they do get the Jets, I believe it is. Yes. I would expect this to be a disgusting game where, with very little play volume, you're dealing with slow Aaron Rodgers who wants to take all of the play clock down to zero just to show us how smart he is, because he's absolutely diagnosing and dissecting everything the defense is going to do. And he needs every last second of that because the sims are in his head. And then you have the Texans who kind of seem like they just don't really want to throw the ball. I mean, it makes sense that without Nico, they're a little less pass happy, but I mean, even with Nico, they still were pretty run heavy. So I would expect this Thursday night game to be an absolute slog. You're probably just going to get a couple teams that want to run the ball over and over into each other's bases. So
you really need the Jets to get stuff going, and as of right now, it's hard to see them get stuff going. I think they certainly can. I think you certainly could get that outcome where the Jets push the Texans a little bit. But yeah, it doesn't feel great.
Yeah. Your last note on running back that you had here, I don't believe is a guy that is on this chart, but it's Rico Dowdle. So there was some really interesting stuff surrounding the Cowboys this week. Let's see if we can find him here. I mean, Zeke Elliott's all the way down here, just barely above 5 expected fantasy points per game, and Dalvin Cook's even lower than that.
But yeah, so everybody's with us. You heard some conspiracy theories last week about the Cowboys running backs.
Yeah, so Dowdle, for anyone looking for him on the chart, is dead center, right next to that Rhamondre Stevenson, Bucky Irving, Chuba Hubbard cluster, right smack dab in the middle between 10 and 15 expected fantasy points a game. So, and I would say that's a pretty apt landing spot for him for what you're thinking you're going to get out of him. Just kind of like that low end running back 2, high end running back 3 type production. The Rico Dowdle rumor mill was that the Cowboys always had wanted to elevate Dalvin Cook off the practice squad coming out of their bye, and they were not willing to make Zeke a healthy scratch due to organizational loyalty to Zeke, or wanting to protect Zeke's ego, or what have you. But allegedly Rico Dowdle was not actually sick, or if he was sick, it was not actually something that was going to make him miss the game. And the Cowboys, essentially chose that, hey, sorry, Rico, you're going to have to sit because Zeke can't sit. And we do want to see what we have in Dalvin Cook. So that's pretty concerning to me. I don't think it's something that continues because
I don't believe that
it's so bad.
I don't believe that. If they were doing that, if that was their plan to get a look at Dalvin Cook, I think they would have given him more snaps. I think they would have played him more. This feels like a little bit more like their main player, Rico Dowdle, or their main back was down. It was next man up in Zeke Elliott, and then Dalvin Cook kind of filled in as needed the rest of the way. Like, and maybe I'm expecting too much logic from the Cowboys, but I would have thought that if the idea was to get a peek at Dalvin Cook, they'd play him more.
Yeah, I've unfortunately been subjected to enough Cowboys bullshit in my life to kind of be able to smell it when I see it. And I mean, I initially was a little suspicious of the Rico Dowdle is sick here coming off the bye. Sick enough to miss the game too. Like think about what most of these players are playing through. Like Kenneth Walker's like puking his guts up out there on the field when he was sick after his birthday, whatever he was doing in Atlanta, and the guy's still out there playing. Like Deebo Samuel is playing through the game with severe pneumonia that he's hospitalized for and fluid in his lungs. Like I'm just saying it takes like these are some of the toughest bastards on the face of the planet, and also like Rico Dowdle is not the kind of he's not a player who like is set for life by any means. Like Rico Dowdle is getting a day job after his stint in the NFL, unless he can get a second contract. So, I mean, unless this guy's on death's door, I don't really see him missing a game because he's sick. It really, and just with all the language from the Cowboys about Dalvin Cook and how he had done everything they needed to see on the practice, like, oh God, it really reeked of, the classic Cowboys nepotism. Like, well, we can't, we love Zeke because Zeke is a Cowboy for life and we can't make him inactive. And so Rico, you're just going to play second fiddle here. And yeah, I'm just suspicious of that. The thing is,
then there's like videos of him signing autographs.
Yes.
Like before the game.
Yeah. When Rico walked out, onto the sideline, you're not going to be able to tell just from looking at someone on the outside, like if they're sick or not, but guy seemed in pretty good spirits and didn't look terribly sick to me. So I don't know, man, it smells fishy to me. I think the good news going forward though, is after seeing Dalvin Cook in this game, I don't really think that you can justify having him be on an active NFL roster anymore. I would hope that
they got their look at what the backfield looks like without Rico Dowdle, and they didn't like it, I bet.
No, yeah. I mean, Rico Dowdle has been described by McCarthy as a bowling ball bowling ball full of butcher knives, and the Zeke Elliott and Dalvin Cook backfield looked like a flat tire full of cotton candy. Like that shit was unwatchable.
Right.
Man,
right.
And the Cowboys continue to do just the inexplicable stuff of like wasting. It's 1st and 15. You're down 3 scores. Let's hand it off to Dalvin Cook up the middle. Like just
right.
Unserious stuff. I mean, you can the whole.
Should we move on to the tight ends?
Yeah, let's get to tight ends here.
So this is our tight end utilization and efficiency chart, and we look at who's on the field for these routes. So the green bar, that's the percentage of team dropbacks that they're running a route, and then more pink bar, that's what they're pass blocking, so that we kind of see so we paint the full picture of how much they're on the field for their team's dropbacks. And I guess one thing that kind of stands out here is Grant Calcaterra with Dallas Goedert's injury. He's been playing pretty strong snaps, but not doing a whole lot.
Yeah, Calcaterra, is a you could do worse type of guy if you really need someone off waivers. But the thing that's tough with Calcaterra is that the Eagles are not throwing the ball very much. So you just, you're a guy who's already struggling.
And these are calorie routes.
Yeah.
These are low calorie routes is what I should say.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's low calorie routes coupled with not a ton of them. So that's the problem here. Man, I'm the guy who we talked about this last week that Cade Otton was going to be in an ascending role, and again,
he's such a smash.
Yeah,
like
we talked about it.
He dominates their offense now.
Yeah, we talked about it in the offseason as well. Of he's a young player, he's had a really high snap share for his entire career, and we don't want to just say that this young tight end is never going to be anything because he's been a really boring little rinky-dink couple targets a game type guy. He had a true spike week in the playoffs last year. And I think going forward, Cade Otton is like a locked-in tight end one, at least until you get Mike Evans back. But he's a smash. I think I had something absurd 70% Cade Otton in DFS this last week. And that certainly paid off. But he's a smash going forward. There is another guy that actually fits into this ascension archetype that Cade Otton got last week, and that's Evan Ingram. I mean, when it comes to Evan Ingram, time is a flat circle. You end up with the Jags wide receiver core getting decimated by injuries, and I would assume that we're going to see what happened last year when we saw that, and Evan Ingram's going to step up and fill that target void. I mean, the guy is definitely good enough to earn the volume. When the competition dwindles, he can fill a lot of the target pie. He had a pretty spectacular catch too. I don't know if you got to watch this game. Absolutely mossed some guys in the end zone. It was literally 3 Packers defenders and Evan Ingram, and he might as well have been covered by nobody with how easy he made that catch look. He's a good athlete. I think the ADOT is more a function of his role than anything reflective of his skill. So he's
always been a low ADOT guy, but the main thing he's getting the targets.
I mean, yeah, but the tricky thing with saying something like he's always been a low ADOT guy is he played for the feckless Giants with Evan Ingram never played with a good quarterback his entire career, or an offense that was going to deploy him in a role that would be more fun. He played for the Giants when they had I believe he got the very, very tail end of Eli's career when Eli was just they were about to take him out behind the barn. And then also you got the beginning of Daniel Jones' career, which was not great. And so you get him operating in these roles, these low 8.
I mean, we don't need to make that excuse for Brock Bowers.
But you get this out of necessity for Evan Ingram, I think, more than anything. And so, and that's not to say the role's going to change now. The role's still going to be this low ADOT guy. I don't think we want to use the low ADOT to write him off as a talent and say, oh, it's just going to be this and granted, he didn't do a ton with Yak. He's going to get great Yak because he has low ADOT, but even then it was a little uninspiring last year. You're probably going to get the same stuff this year. Just because, I mean, when Brian Thomas gets back, maybe it helps him a little bit actually, because he can still absorb some of the target share, but have someone to take some attention from the defense away. Anyway, all that's a really long way of saying I think Evan Ingram's a smash going forward. I mean, he's a locked-in top 6, top 7 tight end rest of the season for me now.
Yeah, he definitely is. I guess that the concern is always with Evan Ingram is you have that secure volume, and you do have a secure volume, but it is. I think it's still a question is he one of the best tight ends in the NFL? I don't think he is. So when you compare where he was going in ADP this draft, he was going next to George Kittle, who is one of the best, who might be the best tight end in the NFL. So I think that's some of where the question mark on talent. I think he's clearly an NFL strong NFL player, but I think it's definitely a questionable, a big question mark on if he's one of the best NFL players, and you've always have to pay a pretty high price for him.
Yeah, that's reasonable. Yeah, I was just more so thinking of the outlook going forward for Evan Ingram is very strong.
Yeah. Like you said, top 7, top 8, and like pretty secure floor.
Yeah. One last guy. Two quick notes on this chart. David Njoku, I mean, incredible upgrade is from the quarterback standpoint. Getting Jameis Winston, continued to build on a strong last couple of weeks. I think he's a really strong play going forward. I'm just gonna shoot through these really quick before we go on to the next one. Sam Laporta sees a big target increase with Jameson out. That was super encouraging to me. I wasn't certain that it would materialize as much as it did, but it definitely looks like his role might be revitalized as long as Jameson is away.
Yeah. I had that noted as kind of some where we got the there's still a chance that it might be like a 1 week blip that he just happened to be more involved with the game plan this week, but something to keep an eye out. If we get another week of that, maybe we're firing Sam Laporta back up again. We're relighting the candles.
Yeah. Last one I wanted to touch on. Dalton Kincaid gets in the end zone this week, but man, every week feels like the same thing for Dalton Kincaid. It's like 5 targets, 6 targets, 7 targets, 7 targets, 6 targets. And it's just all such short little rinky-dink stuff. And he really does not seem like he can do anything with the ball in his hands. He's like I feel like he was billed as like this, he's going to get all these short targets and then rack up the yak. Like that's what he's going to do. Well, his ADOT's a little deeper this year than it was last year, but he's so much closer to a catch and fall down guy than a yak guy. And it just like his floor seems pretty secure, but man, getting the actual ceiling seems tough. Now, if we see the Bills continue, or not continue, but if we see them break their early season trend of being really run heavy, I'm more interested in Dalton Kincaid. But if they're back to their old ways, of just running the ball and sub 30 attempts a game, like Dalton Kincaid is not terribly exciting. He's a decent floor play every week because he does get a lot of targets every week. He's a floor play. He's a floor play. Ass pick.
I think you're getting pretty close to the Evan Ingram profile, at least in terms of ADOT and different things. But the problem is that they're not like the Jaguars might operate their offense through Evan Ingram and Brian Thomas. There's a possibility that they might do that. It's amazing offense, but that's a possible outcome. Whereas there's just no shot. There's no chance that the Bills can operate an offense through Dalton Kincaid. Just not a hope. That's not an offense that is just trying to run through Dalton Kincaid is not an NFL quality offense.
Yeah. Let's move on to the second chart because we got a question in the chat that said, I think you forgot Mark Andrews on this graphic. Nope, we didn't. He's just still here on this 30 to 60% of routes run. Now, as a note, his snap share did increase this week. It was his highest snap share of the season, all the way up to 74%.
Yeah, he had a 74% route share, 79% snap on drop back share last week. And to me, I'm taking that as somewhat signal because it followed good play, and he actually played decently well with that higher snap share. I don't think we're getting old Mark Andrews back anytime soon. I just don't think we got that. But I think we are getting a much better Mark Andrews than we did at the start of the season.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It seems like it's just hard for Baltimore to put the genie back in the bottle with Isaiah Likely. I think they just really like having him out on the field, regardless of how good Mark Andrews is.
They played Mark Andrews more than Likely this week.
Yeah, they finally did. But I still think that they want to keep Likely involved, and so that's gonna cap Andrews' upside just because he's not going to be able to get back to that his old route share.
Right. Well, and to me, it's not just a route share. It's even with So if I look at the last 4 weeks, for Mark Andrews, he's still only at a 20% targets per run, and so like I think that's solid. That's good, but that is just not normal Mark Andrews stuff. Like normal Mark Andrews is like, hey, you got to get this guy the ball. Like you need to do that. Whereas now it's like he's one of the possible options that they can get the ball to, and it works out pretty good. And I think he has kind of reclaimed being the starter ahead of Likely, and just in terms of his route share, and like they target him more. Like they get the ball to Mark Andrews down the field more than Likely. They've been, if you look at it, like kind of like the last 4 games, they've been more successful in doing that. But it's certainly not old Mark Andrews, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get old Mark Andrews, but we definitely could still get a very strong tight end profile for this season. It just won't be old Mark Andrews.
It could be like I think you could end up with like tight end 5 or tight end 6 from Mark Andrews this year.
Yeah, those are. I don't have any other tight ends. I had a note to talk about. Do you have anyone else, or should we move on to the receivers?
Yeah, that's I think we're good to move on here. Yeah, I think we're good to move on. And so I guess that we have some big news here at Deontay that I think we should break down as part of the show. But before we get to that, I'm looking at this receiver chart. The biggest, it's not surprise, or the biggest news to me in the last 2 weeks has been Garrett Wilson kind of maintaining his like target dominant role. Let me pull up the actual numbers behind that. But we'll talk that once Devontae would be in town, that it would kind of kill Garrett Wilson. But if you look at last week, so Garrett Wilson had 8 targets versus 7 for Devontae. Garrett Wilson 29% targets per run. He had a 20, so a lot of air yards there, and then 4.04 yards per out run versus 7 targets at a 9.38 off for Devontae. So that feels like pretty, like, that doesn't feel like vintage Devontae at all. That feels like kind of like older Devontae, second fiddle Devontae. And to me, I don't know if that's it. I'm not necessarily surprised by that, but it's news because there was some risk that Garrett Wilson would kind of get phased out with Devontae trade. But to me, I think that's off the table now.
Yeah, I think if anything, what we'll see is like we might see some quieter games from Garrett Wilson when Devontae and Rodgers are like fully back on the same page and he's been more integrated into the offense. But yeah, I think Garrett Wilson's role is,
you're not getting the 20 targets in a game thing because they don't have anybody else. Like they have an outlet in Devontae, but I feel pretty confident here that you're not getting this outcome where it's vintage Devontae linking up with his long lost friend Aaron Rodgers, and it just cooks Garrett Wilson.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you.
Devontae Adams is clearly the second fiddle to Garrett Wilson. Like, just very clearly, like, he can't do what Garrett Wilson can do at this stage of his career.
I don't want to get to that level. I'm thinking it's more of like like we still might not have seen what Devontae's role is going to be on this offense, or that they can trade off back and forth. It's only been 2 games, and he got traded mid-season. So I don't want to say like, oh, it's very clearly that Garrett Wilson is the dominant one. Like, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw a game in the next week or 2 where Devontae happens to out-target Garrett Wilson, 2-1 or something.
Yeah, at 2-1. I wouldn't be surprised if I saw a game where Devontae out-targeted him, but I'd be surprised if it was by that margin. And the big thing that surprises me about Devontae is that the targets that he's getting are such low ADOT, and I don't know, like, for a player like Devontae to be playing with a quarterback like Art Rodgers who can throw it down the field, to be not getting down the field targets, to just be getting the shorter looks, that seems pretty telling. And maybe I'm reading too much into it, but if Davante Adams could win on a 15-yard in route, like, I like, even though, like, he doesn't, like, he's not fully up to speed on the offense, like, I feel like Rodgers would be feeding him on those if he could do that. But maybe I am reading too much into it. I do feel pretty skeptical that we're gonna get old Devontae, or like I vintage Devontae Adams back here.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I'm willing to kind of give it a little bit more time, since we've only seen 2 games so far. We should talk about Zay Flowers, though, who's near Devontae Adams on the chart, sitting just right in between 50 and 60% weighted targets per route run, and how he's going to be impacted by the Deontay Johnson trade. I mean, I think it's pretty bad for Deontay. It's also probably pretty bad for Zay Flowers, because he really was the target dominator in this offense. And I mean, Deontay Johnson has earned targets. If there's ever been an offense that has had Deontay Johnson in it, like, that guy is earning targets. So I think it's going to be tough for Zay. Not like he's completely dead. It's just like these games where he gets 11, 12 targets, like, I think those are going to be a lot harder to come by now. And I really think that mostly what happens is he sucks up, Deontay, sucks up a lot of the volume from, like the Nelson Aguilar and Rashad Bateman. Like, I think Bateman is really going to be hurt by this.
Yeah, I think that's what happens. I think that Bateman and Aguilar will be those are the guys who get hurt the most. And the only thing about it is that I do think that by replacing targets to Aguilar and Bateman with targets to Deontay, like, I think that can help the offense as a whole, and that can open things up for Zay Flowers. So I don't know that it's, like, necessarily, like, as big a negative for Zay as you do. And then the other piece about it is that so just if you look at last week, this isn't the full season, but Zay Flowers had an ADOT of 17, and so the and then a lot over the course of the year, like, Bateman's gotten high ADOT targets as well. So, like, this offense is an offense that wants to throw it deep, and so I don't think that Deontay can be that, like, guy who's going to get a target 20 yards down the field. I'm not saying that he can't, or that he can't have, that he's always going to be like a 5 ADOT guy, or that he will be in this offense. But he's definitely an underneath to intermediate guy. Like, that's where he wins. And so I think there's plenty of room for Zay Flowers on the deeper target stuff. Like 12 targets with a 17 ADOT. To me, that suggests that, like, there's a pretty plentiful room for a down the field role for Zay Flowers here, that Deontay isn't really in place to touch.
Yeah, that's reasonable. this was one of the situations where the Ravens were having to pass because they were trying to come back late.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that when you get the run heavy game scripts, which if you look at the Ravens schedule for the rest of the season, I think we're in for a lot of them. I mean, I think that's where you're really in trouble. Where Flowers previously was maybe just going to get enough target volume that it was fine, even in the run heavy game scripts. Maybe he could get there early before they started salting the game away. But I'm pretty worried about in those game scripts. Even taking 2-3 targets from Flowers is like a pretty big hit in those type of game scripts. I think we're going to have substantially more of those than the more favorable passing game scripts as we close out the season here for the Ravens.
Well, I think I don't think he's taken that many targets from Flowers. I think he's taking them from Allgeier and Bateman, and then the Ravens offense still does need a down the field target, and so I don't think Deontay can touch that. So I think that's still going to be pretty important for that offense, and I think that still that still has to happen. And if Bateman is taken off the field for Deontay, then that has to run through Flowers. I think the talent mode is pretty good there, and the upgrade to the offense overall kind of mitigates the volume hit.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Well, it'll definitely be an interesting situation to watch. A spot that I think is kind of interesting this week. I mean, we talked about this offense last week. You were excited about the Troy Franklin play. I definitely drafted a Troy Franklin and Bo Nix team in the Dog Bowl, just leaning on the huge team total against the terrible Carolina Panthers. And playing into that game was right. Bo Nix was a fantastic play. They ran the score up against the Panthers and just refused to let up even after the Panthers were waving the white flag. So there were plenty of fantasy points to be had. Unfortunately, none of them for Troy Franklin and quite a lot of Cortland Sutton. So Sutton, it's been weird because it doesn't seem like he's the best fit for Bo Nix. There was a lot of, in Stealing Signals this week, Gretsch talked about how apparently Nix had been having trouble driving the ball downfield, and he was short arming a lot of stuff, had some bad mechanics with apparently his footwork that was leading to him short arming a bunch of throws, and that was making it a lot more difficult for Cortland Sutton, who had a higher ADOT, to end up producing. This week it seems like he got that together. Sutton had over 100 yards, something like 14 targets. Let me pull up the.
Yeah, my Excel sheet that I used to pull this stuff. Oh, it just uncrashed. He had 150 air yards.
Yeah, 100 yards on the button.
Run.
11 targets.
11 targets, 101 yards.
Now,
what's puzzling? What's puzzling to me about the Troy Franklin thing is that you had this multi-week trend of routes being up, of strong underlying usage that. He played a little bit, got high targets, and then he was playing more, keeping the targets. And then last week, his snap rate cratered, his route rate cratered, and pretty devastating for my call there. I definitely got that one wrong.
Now I maybe misremembering, was Lil Jordan Humphrey? Was he injured the past couple weeks? I think he.
No, I think. Well, was he injured? Maybe you're right. Maybe that's what drove that is Lil Jordan Humphrey.
Yeah, because he was on the field. He was on the field quite a bit. I'm trying to find if he was on the injury report in previous weeks.
He was not injured.
Okay.
He was not injured. He played less. He played less while Troy Franklin was playing more, and then they bumped them back up to a 52% route share. Honestly, really baffling. Maybe I should just give up trying to interpret Broncos receiver usage.
I mean, I kind of want to just go because no one's going to play Sutton this week anyway, and you get the Ravens, who are a huge pass funnel, right?
Yeah, I mean that makes sense.
I kind of just want to go to Sutton because sure, you've got the wild card factor of like Sean Payton might just tell you to go fuck yourself this week, and Cortland Sutton gets 0 targets for fun, like he has this season. But
right, and he's done it for Sutton too. Right,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like Cortland Sutton has gotten just totally goosed and like zero target against the Saints, 0 targets just for fun. So like it definitely can happen, but I think with that volatility, I think people are going to be scared because they just saw him get 0 targets. Like sure, he put up 100 yards on 11 targets this week, but I don't really think that people are excited to play Cortland Sutton. So I think it's a pretty good spot for him, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good spot.
Anyone else that you want to touch on this chart, or should we move on to the next one?
No, I think we've kind of covered it here. Yeah, I think we've kind of covered. I guess it's probably worth going into Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Like I'm just honestly just for myself to look at it. So with last week at a 91% route share, he had 24% targets per out run, 2.4 yards per out run, and then 7 targets, 69 yards. So in a game where it should have opened up for him, it just didn't. And I guess you what you're looking at with JSN is just this like completely competent, fine possession receivers. That's kind of what this feels like.
Yeah. I don't know. The JSN stuff is definitely frustrating. That's another one where I kind of want to go back to the well this week, though. I know that sounds crazy, but you get the Rams. I'm not sure if it sounds like Metcalf might be back, and if he is back, like you're gonna get JSN entirely off the radar, so it might still even be okay. If he's not back, I do think I just want to go back to the well with JSN. Lockett just really not being as involved as I thought he was going to be this past week. I mean, it might have to do with kind of the way that they treated Walker. I think they're pretty cognizant of like managing the reps for Lockett and also for Walker. Like for the players that are either important or older that they like don't want to put a ton of wear and tear on. I think they kind of dialed them back after the game got out of hand this last week, and so you didn't get as much Lockett. Walker sat at the end of the game. But yeah, I don't know. JSN definitely. I think the hope that he's like this super elite target dominator, that I think the ship sailed there.
Yeah. So just looking at the numbers here, week 8, Tyler Lockett, he had a 97% route share, but just 6% targets per out run. So that's 2 targets on what? 29 routes? Yeah, 29, 31 routes. So that strikes me as a little odd.
Yeah, definitely a little strange there. But
so I guess that's just a player on the downswing, right? So like not somebody you're not worried about blocking JSN from dominating targets.
No,
it just happened. Right. But sorry, I interrupted you. You were moving on.
No, yeah, let's move on to the next chart here, because there's a couple guys I think on this next one that are pretty interesting. I mean, so Cooper Kupp got pretty overshadowed by Puka in their first week back here. This is a pretty great
Right, on the
spot.
field and inner perception.
Yes, yeah. But this is a pretty great spot for Cooper Kupp. And I don't want to immediately assume like, oh, yep, Puka's going to dominate everything going forward. I think the most likely thing is that Puka is going to be the one earning more targets in a given week, but I think Stafford can support them both. And
so I think that the reason that Kupp gets overshadowed now is so he did get 8 targets last week, so 29% targets per run. I think he's still an important part of the offense, but his ADOT has cratered this year. So 7.4 in week 1. Now he did get 21 targets in week 1, 6.7 in week 2 before he left, and then 6.8 last week. I think you have to be on watch for a player who is kind of like at the twilight of their career, and it can still be pretty important part of the offense. Still, like, they need Kupp to play well for the offense to play well, and still going to have good fantasy weeks. But I think it's right that Puka. I think that's like the correct interpretation that Puka overshadows Kupp.
Yeah, I just my main point here is just for a single week, contests. I do think that if you're getting Kupp at like a major ownership discount or price discount, like it's a pretty good spot to attack because I think you can get these Kupp nuclear weeks still, certainly. So I wanted to bring him up. Another guy I wanted to mention on this chart that I think is making a case for being one of the most talented receivers in football is George Pickens. I thought George Pickens was really good coming into the season, like leaving last season. I thought he was good to start this season. I just thought the offense was limiting him. He's still looking incredible. I mean, the touchdown that got called back for him was like the most BS like touchdown reversal call I've ever seen, where he taps the same foot twice in the end zone, but you must tap both. You have to tap 2 different feet for it to count as a catch, which during the halftime show, Jason Kelsey had a hilarious point that, well, technically by the letter of the law on this rule, you could catch the ball with 1 foot down and then hop on that foot without ever touching your second foot to the ground all the way down the field for 50 yards and then hop out of bounds, and it's not a catch, which is quite funny because that is the actual definition of the rule.
That is funny. I mean, my honestly, in my head, that had always been the way that you're supposed to do it. Like, it has to be inbounds. You have to have like 2 feet, like, because those you have to have both feet. But yeah, that is it's a frustrating one for him.
Yeah, anyway, what I was trying to get at is I think George Pickens is elite. He can deliver. I mean, the spike week that defined the playoffs, the best ball playoffs last year, like, is very squarely in that range of outcomes for George Pickens every week. Like, that's what makes him an interesting player. Russ did not look great again for the majority of the game, but then he did have a couple pretty
he throws the moon balls that Pickens can catch.
He had a couple pretty good deep shots this game too. Last game, like, the majority of the deep balls were not. I don't think he had a single good deep ball last week. The ones that converted were pure like 50-50 interceptable passes, danger. Like they would be graded as danger throws, like they were interceptions in another universe. This week there were a couple that were actual dimes, like the Van Jefferson the Calvin Austin one was pretty awesome. Like, that was a legitimately good throw. So like, I want to give Russ his flowers where it's due. I also do not think that that efficiency is sustainable for him. Just watching the entire games for both of the games we've seen Russ play, he doesn't look very good. but he is able to occasionally throw a pretty good ball. So that is what makes Pickens really fun. Man, there's a couple guys on this chart, though, that I think are in really – I mean –
Yeah, Russ was airing it out. So Pickens, he had a 12.4 ADOT, but then a lot of Russ's passes were pretty deep this week. Let me. That probably doesn't need to be what you call it. So Russ's ADOT this week was 10.7 after 9.2 last week. So he actually was throwing it pretty deep, which is interesting. I still think when the Steelers aren't playing with the lead and are in trouble, he's going to look a lot weaker. But it is interesting that he was throwing it deep a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Some of the other guys on this chart that I think are really interesting. We talked about Ladd a little bit, but he is like the dominant wide receiver one on that team now, and I think it's only going to get more and more clear going forward. I think he still has room to earn more targets in this offense, and we've seen the passing trend up for this offense. I think it's like wheels it's a buy high spot for Ladd McConkey, in my opinion. Like he seems like he's going to be the dominant wide receiver one in this offense, and he's attached to a really good quarterback. And if they're willing to actually keep the pass rate up, he's really interesting. Yeah, for sure. He's definitely going to be the main receiver on that offense. The only thing I'm looking at his targets per run in the last game was 20%, and it was an 8 out of 13, and he had a really good game. I guess I think when I saw the excitement, I was kind of expecting a little bit stronger underlying usage, but like you said, there's definitely room to run there where it can get higher. But I am a little bit surprised that it's not higher already. Yeah, I think we could still see it grow, though. Man, a guy who I think we're going to see absolutely explode, though, in these next couple weeks is Josh Downs. You know what? Okay, you know what is funny? Josh Downs was kind of pegged as this, like, oh, he's a underneath slot type guy.
That's what we said.
Yeah, he gets the deep ball from Anthony Richardson this week, 69-yard touchdown, where they had him running a deeper route there. It wasn't just like it was all yards after catch. So I do think that Josh Downs is probably not as limited in his role as we may have thought previously. I think he's just a really good receiver. If anything, I think he's probably like a little bit closer to what we're seeing from Ladd McConkey. Like, I think he can probably operate everywhere on the field. He's smaller than Ladd McConkey, but I mean, you're getting the big time quarterback upgrade with Flacco for him. He's very clearly the best receiver on the team to me. Like he is substantially better than Michael Pittman. And pretty much all the peripherals support that as well. So I think he's the one that benefits the most. He's also a great buy. If you're in a league, like a home league where you've got trading, I don't think that the upside can be properly priced in by a lot of people here. Like I know this is going to sound a little hot takey, but I think there are outcomes where Josh Downs is like a low end wide receiver one to finish the season. Yeah. If like, I think you need Joe Flacco to start the rest of the way. Right. But if he does, like, so low end wide receiver one, that's like wide receiver 11 or 12. Yeah. Rest of season, that feels totally reasonable. Yeah, like in line with like Garrett Wilson production, like that doesn't seem unreasonable to me. Right. And you're right. His peripherals are way better. He's earning way more targets. He's getting more yardage per route than Pittman. Like, he is the best receiver on that team. Yeah, it's not close either. let's see. Oh, the last guy I wanted to talk about on this chart, Chris Olave. So, man, a couple interesting things here. So it looks like Derek Carr should be back this week. You would think that would be a large positive for Olave. Now, previously when Carr was in, Olave almost like legitimately played second fiddle to Rashid Shaheed. Now you've got Shaheed out of the way now, unfortunately, with his season-ending injury. So Olave might just be like the only show in town here with Carr back, and will be force-fed. Like Carr now won't have any choice other than to look his way. But again, you get the Saints with this really awesome matchup against the Panthers. There's a couple. I'm conflicted here because I want to be in on Olave this week. It seems like a really good spot, but I think I'm pretty sure the market might be overvaluing him right now because the Saints have told us they want to run, right? Like the Saints would love to just run the ball, and they should be able to do that against the Panthers. And like right now, let me tell you who Olave goes around in these dog bowl drafts, just for we can have some frame of reference here. So Chris Olave going right at the 2-3 turn, ADP of 23.4. Here's the receivers that he's going ahead of, and I want your opinion on these. So he's going ahead of Devonta Smith by a good number of picks. Going ahead of DK Metcalf, who's questionable, so that's obviously a weird one. Zay Flowers, Marvin Harrison, T. Higgins, DJ Moore. Do you think he should be ahead of all those guys here?
No, and I think those are all guys who are kind of like undervalued here. Like I think Devontae is undervalued. I think Zay Flowers is undervalued. The rest of the guys, I kind of get it with the injury concerns. I kind of get it with the injury risks. I think, I think those guys are just undervalued. The pick on Olave, it seems fine. It seems like an efficient price, like an efficient to okay price actually. Just because, like you said, you could get an outcome where they do throw a decent amount, and he dominates those targets. But the base case is definitely for them to run the ball a lot and to not actually be that much passing volume. I guess in Olave's favor, so week 2 he did get a 38% at targets per out run. Week 4, 24%, 29%. Week 3, 24%. Week 4, 29%. So like he has been a pretty consistent, strong, dominant target earner on throughout the season when he's played, and I think that only kind of like concentrates now. So I think you have that going for him, but you have overall like offensive volume concerns massively there.
Yeah, I guess for me, like in the context of like dog bowl ADP, to me feels like a pretty clear tier break as far as like talent right around there, where the guys going before him are like Drake London, Cooper Kupp, Kenneth Walker, James Cook, and then you get to like Terry McLaurin, Chris Olave, and it's like, man, that feels like a pretty stark drop off there. So I think what we'll see when projections are out is I think that you'll end up with some of these wide receivers getting pushed a little later. So they all kind of cluster around like the 3-4 turn. And I think you see like the beginning of the second or beginning of the third round and really like the whole third. I think the entire third is going to be occupied by a lot of these higher end quarterbacks and some of the higher projecting tight ends this week, because you're going to get guys like Evan Ingram, Trey McBride, David Njoku that all project really well, along with some of these quarterbacks where I think the quarterback should rightfully get pushed back a little bit. Like Lamar is going too early right now. Josh Allen is going too early right now. Jalen Hurts.
I don't like that Cooper Kupp price, to be honest. Maybe I'm paying too much attention to the low ADOT over his 3 games. but I think that might be giving too much deference to his prior.
Would you take Drake London over Cooper Kupp?
Yes.
Me
Yes,
too.
easily.
Terry McLaurin over Cooper Kupp.
I think that's close. I think that's close enough. Probably Terry. Honestly, probably Terry, but it's pretty close. And then I think Olave Cooper Kupp is pretty close too. So I think Kupp actually belongs in the Terry Olave range.
See, I think I'm going to disagree with you there, just because I think the pass volume for them should be like the total number of targets that we can expect for Kupp. I think it's going to be a lot better than what we can expect for Olave or Terry. I might be wrong on that though. I'm so gun shy about the Saints running the crap out of the ball into the Panthers that's giving me a lot of pause there with Olave. And then for Terry, I mean, like, Jaden Daniels has been incredible, but also, like, there really isn't a ton of, like, a lot of the production is just getting spread around, or, like, you know, guys you're learning a name for every week, or, like, getting 20 yards or whatever for Jaden Daniels. So I don't know. It's probably I think you're probably right that Cooper Kupp and Terry should basically be like, I bet they'll be pretty close when projections come out.
So Terry McLaurin, if I just look at his average, 24% targets per out run, and then he's had weeks where he's at 34%, 29%, 32%, and then earlier in the year he had a brutal stretch. And last week he was just at 23%. I think with Terry, like, even though it's his target share is probably like trends a little bit, just a tad lower than Kupp, like not that much lower, but just a little bit lower. I think your chances of the explosive plays are higher.
Yeah. As I look at the game totals, there's about a 5 or 4.5 point difference here between the Commanders and Giants game and the Seahawks and Rams. Yeah, it's 5.5 point difference, 43 to 48.5. So that's another thing that just gives me a little bit of pause there on Terry. I think if you made me guess right now, I'm going to say that Kupp comes in projected higher than Terry. But I think they're definitely closer than Olave will be. I think Olave.
I would project them. I would project Terry for more air yards, pretty comfortably.
Yeah. That's reasonable. I just think the target volume is going to be substantially greater for Kupp. So it kind of comes out in the wash for them. But
I don't think it's substantial.
Okay.
I think you're talking about 2 or 3 more targets.
Yeah,
I think you're talking about 9. You're probably talking about a projection of 7 or 8 for McLaurin, and then maybe 10 for Kupp. And you're talking about like an ADOT of like 12 to 15 versus like 7 to 9.
Yeah. No, that I think you're right. The more I think about it, they're probably pretty close. It'll be interesting to see how they shake out this week.
Yeah, for sure.
But let's move to this last chart here. We'll wrap it up. We're over the 2-hour mark now. Puka being on this chart is kind of funny, but he did only play limited number of snaps here in his first game back from injury, but dominated targets nonetheless with above an 80% weighted targets per route run. So I fully expect him to be back on the starters chart before.
Right. I mean, Puka, that Puka run out is a pretty good example of why when people say especially when you're talking about a star and they're coming back from injury and they're like, oh, he's on a pitch count. You can't play him. He's on a pitch count. When these stars are on pitch counts, it means they're on a pitch count on like a play basis. But when they're on the field, they're going to target the shit out of them. Like that's when you're talking about a guy like Puka, that's kind of how that works. And I think that's something to. I don't think there's going to be many people listening to this podcast that are going to be like surprised by like how it ran out or like it's going to be a lesson for them. But I think it's worth kind of noting.
Yeah. I wish that I had been on a call with you when I was getting ready to submit my showdown lineups for that Rams-Vikings game, because I adjusted the Puka projection up by like 40%. Most of the projection sites had him around like 7 for projection. I was like, that just does not seem right to me. So I jammed the projection way up, like 40% increase, which is pretty massive in DFS, especially.
No, I agree.
And I ran my normal process and still was not getting any Puka. And I was like, God, I think I want to play Puka tonight. I'm pretty sure people are just really wrong on the projection, and the ownership was super low. And I almost just doubled this projection, just put him at 100% of what he was projected at, put him at like 15. And I didn't have the stones to do it. It's like, I'm gonna trust my process. I bumped the projection way up. I still didn't get any of him. It's fine. And then of course he's just atomic in the game. That was a generational wealth spot. If I put the projection where I wanted to, just had the stones.
40% sounds like a lot, but relative to the volatility, the input volatility, it's probably not that much.
And that's what I was struggling with too. I was like, God, a normal projection for Puka on this slate would be like 18 or 19, so even 15 would be low. And so, yeah, it was just a question of like, how fragile is the projection? And then like, it's really difficult. I think the proper way to.
But nobody could have projected like a 41% targets per hour run.
No. But I think I'm really just saying this more for myself. The proper way to handle a situation like that with so much input volatility is not to take what you think is the rate or the probability of the outcome occurring and then multiply that by the average value of the outcome and get like an expected value for, hey, this is what his projection should be, because 40% of the time he's super limited and is projected for 7, and that's the correct projection. And 60% of the time he's like 80% of himself and he's projected for 15. And then, getting the expected value from those frequencies and weights, I don't think is actually the right way to do it in DFS. I think if anything, you want to iterate through the scenario. You want to iterate through each scenario rather than using a blend.
Or the other way to think about it would have been like, hey, this is a super volatile input. Ownership is super low. And the payoff, if I get this right, is really high because the ceiling is there, the ownership is low, and that's just a good DFS play. Yeah. And if I mean, easy, that's a Monday morning quarterback view, but I think that's the kind of like evergreen takeaway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Other guy I wanted to touch on this chart, Cedric Tillman. We talked about the Browns' offense a little bit. He looks interesting for sure. Got great target volume. He's getting targeted at all depths too. It's not just like he's the deep ball guy or the short area guy. Like he's all over the place. He kind of looks like he is. If I had to guess, I would say he's probably going to be the emerging alpha on this team. So he's very interesting. I would expect that we see him graduate to the next chart with a higher.
So he had a 93% route rate in week 8, and one thing I kind of said at the start of the show that went under the radar is Elijah, and I think you touched on this too. Actually, we both touched on this. Was that Elijah Moore actually out-targeted Cedric Tillman? But it went under the radar because he was like a lower ADOT, and he didn't catch the deep touchdown.
He didn't have the game-winning touchdown. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think those are two good guys to think of in like combination.
And here's the most fun part of this whole Browns receivers conversation. If you had to pick your 2 favorites to have on your roster of all the Browns receivers, Cedric Tillman, Elijah Moore, or Jerry Jeudy, which 2 would you?
It's not fucking Jerry Jeudy.
It's not fucking Jerry Jeudy because that guy stinks. Oh man, it feels good to be right. All right, last guy I had on this chart that I think is interesting is Jalen Coker. You get the Deontay trade, shipping him out of town. Jalen Coker looks like he can play too. Granted, it's going to be with terrible quarterback play, so your mileage may vary here. But Jalen Coker is like a very interesting stash. He's definitely. I went out and there's a dynasty league where he was on waivers, and I just blew all my fab on him because it's like, what else are you going to use your fab for in dynasty?
Right.
So he's a pretty interesting guy. Like probably most interesting in dynasty, where you can hold him and hope to get better quarterback play in a season or so. But I wouldn't be surprised if he, pops up here and there for a good game or two for the rest of the season.
I mean, he's the type of guy you have to take a swing on in waivers.
Yeah.
Where like all the plays on waivers are 10. They're all 10. 99% of them. A handful of them have some kind of upside because the guy is younger and he could emerge. And even though it doesn't feel good to like unload the clip on somebody like that, you kind of have to do it a little bit. When I say unload the clip, I'm talking like a 10 to 20% rate probably. Because there is potential outcomes where Jalen Coker is the guy you need from waivers. I think Xavier Legette, he's somebody who's probably more rostered more often, so won't be as on many waivers. But I think he's just as interesting, if not more. He has that kind of first round draft capital. The Jalen Coker, his college profile is like it's not bad. He was like an older guy, like 22, playing for Holy Cross, and like his production was solid. It's certainly not the ideal profile for like a smaller school guy, but it's fine. That I think that's something to keep in mind of like between him and Legette. Maybe I'm not like, maybe this isn't a controversial take that Legette is a better pickup, but did want to like, I think that's like a caveat to like to frame it.
Right. Yeah. All right. I did not have any notes on anyone else here. Did you have anyone else you wanted to talk about before we shut it down?
Yeah, maybe we should talk about McMillan. We talked about Cedric Tillman was one of the waiver pickups last week. We talked about Troy Franklin, who I liked, who didn't pan out, and McMillan. So he did get the route share pickup, but he was stuck on 15% targets per run. 7 targets, 14.6 ADOT. He combined that for just 35 yards, and a 0.76 yards per out run. So not really not great for McMillan. It's feeling like a ship chasing curse lives on. I think on waivers you hold him for another week. But if this guy can't do anything with everybody gone, and he's getting a 90% route share, like I think the leash has to be a little bit short, and you have to be ready to churn.
Yeah, that's a good call, and I agree. You gotta wait, give it at least one more week and just see. But yeah, we can't just die on the Jalen McMillan hill if production.
Right. That's the thing about redraft, is that you do get to cut these guys. They're stuck on our best ball rosters, but we can switch them out, flip them out for somebody else in redraft.
The really good thing about my best ball teams this year is I won't have to tilt them for all that much longer, because week 14 is not that far away, and I ain't advancing shit to the playoffs this year.
Yeah. I dipped down to like a 13%. I think it's like a 13% advance rate. And that's probably, I'll be happy if I finish that for the year. I'll be happy if I can just get some live teams true. Not a great year, unfortunately.
No, it's not that great. But you don't need to hear us commiserate about our best ball portfolios. I think that's going to do it for the show this week. We appreciate you sticking with us all the way through. Hope we gave you some actionable info, and we will look forward to seeing you next week, where we will be live during the election, right? On election night. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you need a distraction from election night, tune in to Start Chasing.
Yep.
All right, have a good one, everyone.